Thanks for tuning in to this episode of I Have Something to Say, where subject matter experts are unafraid and unapologetic about sharing their perspectives regarding issues that impact our lives. They speak up because basically they give a shit. So if you're tired of canned answers and want to finally hear real people cut through the BS and talk about real issues, this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Sami Heyman Marrero from Urbender, and behind our mixer is our producer, Chris Majoka from You Do You. Hi, everyone. Welcome to I Have Something to Say. Shalanda and I are so very excited and very happy to have two amazing women all the way from Minnesota today. They both have run for office in recent years in their respective communities in Minnesota, and they came close to winning. We'll hear about that. It's pretty impressive stuff. And now they just recently decided to run again. We got together by way of Shalanda, right, Shalanda?
Yes. I am so excited about this podcast. I'm excited about all podcasts, but this one in particular because, I'm originally from the Virgin Islands, but I took a 4-year detour to Minnesota before relocating to Florida. And during that detour, I met Janet. Janet is a mother like I am, and we were both in a period of job transition. And she's such an authentically wonderful, inspirational woman that I feel blessed to call her a sister friend. And so, the blessings of my time in Minnesota is I was able to create a collection, a tapestry, a fabric of powerful, dynamic women. And in that weaving of networks, we also had Robin Morton, who's another sister friend of Janet and mine. And the power of our collective culture as of people of color is that we tend to bring each other together. So Robin connected us with Alberder, which is just totally awesome. And now I'm connecting everybody with Sami.
Here we go. So now we want to thank you. That's the backstory. You know that there's always a backstory.
Always a backstory.
The people that we engage with and people that we want to amplify. These important voices of leadership in our communities. And so I want to welcome Janet Kitui. She's a longtime resident of Edina. Am I right?
Edina.
Edina City in Minnesota. She's a state employee. She currently serves on the Edina Housing Task Force and the Energy and Environment Commission's Business Energy Working Group. She has, again, just in the past, just recently, announced her candidacy for a Edina City Council, a seat she ran for in 2018, and that lost to an incumbent by a 29 vote margin. I mean, that's not even a margin. You can't even call that a margin. Come on. A minuscule, right? It's like almost there.
Yeah, okay. But very impressive.
Absolutely. And then we also have Alberder Gillespie. She's the co-founder of Black Women Rising, which leverages the collective power of Black women. And we're going to take a deep dive into that in a little bit. Alberder ran in 2016 for a seat on the Minnesota House of Representatives, and she just recently announced her candidacy for the 4th Congressional District of Minnesota, and we're beyond. Beyond doesn't even reach. Happy to have you here with us today. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And so
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, please. Yes, absolutely, Alberder and Janet. And so let's just dive right into it. Why are you deciding to run again? And so let's say, Janet, please share with us why have you decided to give it a second round now?
I ran again this time because I am beating the drum for social justice and economic justice and racial justice in our city. A moment of crisis holds possibility for change toward a more just society. Just to give you a background of why I even ran in 2018, in 2016, a Black man walking in our city in Edina here was stopped by a police in undercover police in street clothing. So this man was simply walking down the street, but was stopped. And in that incident, it just became clear that some of us are considered we don't belong to this city. And that is part of the reason I ran to say we are citizens of this country, we are citizens of this city, and we belong in this state. And when you take that narrative, it becomes the reason why some of us are living on the margins of our economy and not fully participating. A child born in Minnesota is not going to be, a Black child or brown child for that matter, will not be able to complete and get a diploma. And that just runs the whole gamut of employment, housing, wealth accumulation. It has an impact on that. And this is rooted in the historical policies that have been created by our leaders to oppress some of us. So I ran to bring that voice at the table and say, we are here and this is how we need representation to change the outcome of the future generations of brown and Black children. That's the reason I ran.
If I could chime in, just so people have a little bit of context of how profound Janet's decision to go into the political arena, particularly in Edina. Edina is predominantly white, a very affluent area. And when she talks about these challenges, particularly within that context, can be even more challenging. I know from my experience, I made the conscious decision when I moved to Minnesota to move to Bloomington, closer to Jefferson High School, as opposed to maybe going to Kennedy High School, which is more diverse, because the resources were at Jefferson, and so you have to be able to bridge and provide resources across the board so that meeting people where they're at and elevating them. So I am just really super impressed and proud of Janet to take on this plight, particularly within that context.
Yeah, and within that community, right? And that neighborhood particularly, right? And then Alberta, tell us your why, and also this movement, of rising. I mean, I'm sure it's all tied together. So please share with us.
Yeah, it's absolutely all tied together. So I'll try and be brief, which might be difficult.
No, but, please. No, we got time, girl. We got time.
So my why, I've been involved in politics for probably over 15 years. I am currently a Minnesota Amateur Sports Commissioner. I've been a school board member. I sit on the board of Common Cause. I'm the board chair for the Black Civic Network. You name it. I was the Senate District Chair for my area. I've run a lot of campaigns, including a congressional campaign. So really been involved in politics for a long time and have coached, vetted, advised so many candidates I can't keep count of. And I've been living in this district, this congressional district, for my entire time in Minnesota. So which is almost 27 years. Wow. And then I live in the city of Woodbury, which is very similar to Janet's city, very similar in terms of demographics. And so, and then my reason for being in politics and being involved is really because I see that as a way for me to make a difference, to influence policy, is by getting people elected who will represent me, my views, and my values, right? So I don't need to be in front, but I love strategy because I own my own business and I'm a strategist. That's what I do. And and I thought that's how I can use my skills. And at some point, it was very clear to me that some of the folk that I was working to get elected all throughout the city, all throughout the state of Minnesota, were not necessarily representing my views and my values. So, right? So you put all this work in and you don't see any change, you don't see any improvement. The disparities in Minnesota continue to grow.
Mhm.
And what's even more disappointing is that because we do live in the areas, in these suburban areas, sometimes elected officials don't want to speak about that because they feel like that won't resonate with voters in their area.
Right.
So they remain silent. And so, it's kind of that old adage, if you want something done right, you do it yourself. And so I I decided, yeah. So I decided that would I would run for office. It was the thing that I never really wanted to do. Never, I'm like, people had asked me for years now to run for office, and I was like, nope, no, thank you. I'm good being back here making things happen, right? Being the Olivia Pope. So I'm like, I'm good with that. I'm good with that. And so, but there was there are always these moments, I think, where things happen and they are life changing. And so in 2015, actually, my father passed away. And my dad had actually run for office before, and my mother had run for office. I would even consider myself a political person. And my sister had run for office, but I'm like, I never even thought of it as politics. I thought of it as a public service. So but when my father passed away and I was at his funeral, and I actually at the end, I got up and I gave this speech, and it just came out of nowhere, that all of those things that we thought we couldn't do and shouldn't do, we need to do them because time is not promised to us. And the one thing about my dad was that he was a Black man who grew up in Mississippi, but he did not allow that to stop him pursuing whatever dream he had. And so, and I'm thinking we have more opportunity than he does. So how dare I not stand in that space, right? So, and I thought, and this is literally what I said myself. I I thought about him being in that, that casket, if you will, and I said, if you can't do that to me, I'm okay. Because a lot of times we're afraid that people will attack our character and they'll make up lies and all the negativity that's in politics. We don't want any parts of that, and they'll destroy me, publicly. And so that fear will keep us. So that was my fear because a husband and two children, and you're thinking you don't want to put anyone through that. But then I thought to me, you can say sticks and stones may break my bones, but I'm not going to let your words hurt me.
Right.
So I don't say that words don't hurt because they do, but I'm going to decide to rise above that. So I decided I ran in 2016, and as the Tale of Two Cities says, it was the best of times and the worst of times. And but so it was the party that I was running for, which was the Democratic Party, DFL here. I didn't really get attacked by the other party. It was the party that I had worked for years, who spent most of my campaign attacking me on every level. And I never expected that. Never expected that. So what I realized is that when African American women, Black women, when we run for office, we really don't have a support system. And it's not that we don't want to run, but we don't have a person who we can call and say, hey, I live in a suburb that is not very diverse. Can I really do this?
Right.
And then how do I do this? And so this is how, Black Women Rising, we had just started to meet, and it came out of that. So we've been around for about 4.5 years. So we started a little bit before I even started to run for office. I saw this need, but after I really saw this need.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
So then we formed Black Women Rising and have helped a lot of candidates get elected, but more importantly, help them through this process and help them navigate that platform. And that's how Janet and I actually got connected, was that she was thinking about running, reached out to me, and I sat down with her, and it's, that's, and the rest is history. And so I've met some amazing women. So I'll just quickly say, in terms of running for Congress, I had been asked to run for Congress. People have talked to me about running for lieutenant governor. That's after I did so well in my state rep race. Then they said, "Oh, you're a viable candidate." When they told me before, a Black woman can't win in the suburbs. But it's like, we love you, but it's the suburbs. I'm like, I've lived out here for about 17 years. This is my community. It's not just the suburbs. It's my community. and I've been committed to my community. So the idea that I can't run because I'm a Black woman, it's unacceptable to me. And so
that's fantastic.
It's always impossible until it's done, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Until it's done.
Yeah.
Until it's done.
That was Mandela said that. Yes. Yes, it's always impossible until it gets done. Yeah. This is really great, and I think it's inspiring too, because sometimes we're challenged with this notion that it's like having a baby, right? There's never the right time, you know.
Right.
And so then if you're waiting for all of the right criteria and for the planets to align,
It'll never happen.
to make it never happen. But the thing is, if people look up to you as a voice, to step in and get into that powerful yet vulnerable space, to make a difference, I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think it's courageous also, especially given the demographic profile of the communities that you live in, and the, how do you say, the resistance that you might get and that you have experienced already, for even considering, let alone running, but you've already both done it once. So it's like you're no stranger to it. And I really applaud your determination and your perseverance, and also your, how do you say, nurturing each other and supporting each other, because I think that's Sholanda was talking about the very fabric of our community earlier and how that's woven. And that's exactly what I feel like all of this is about, about eliminating silos and really demonstrating how collaborative initiatives can really elevate the conversation and also affect change in a real way. Yeah, this is really really fantastic. I know that you guys have outlined your campaign pillars. I know that I was reading, Janet, about your three pillars, are about development, sustainability, and equity. And so if you could just share a little bit more about why you've kind of like put your finger on these three, which I'm sure that they have ramifications, but why the focus on these three critical areas in your view?
Yes. Like I say, the three pillars when they affect the brown and Black community, they affect the larger community as well. And how I like to say, opportunity and justice, those are intertwined. And justice comes when good people choose to do uncomfortable things. So I choose to run because when it comes to development, we are kind of left out, whether it is at the city level when the developers come into the city, they are all motivated by the profit, the bottom line.
Right.
And that is their single motivation, and forget the other things. So the other things being, in this community where I can find affordable housing, I also need connectivity to be able to get transportation to my work or school. And you will find that the concentration of affordable housing is also lacking in those other amenities that can holistically appeal to the entire community. So I am really into development because I want to be able to also bring in the other things that cannot be measured by a singular metric of profit only. There are other things the community needs to build on. So that ties into even how the children access school. So we are a fully developed city. So right now we are kind of going through a cycle of where we need new development, tearing down older homes, upgrading them. And I truly believe that I have an opportunity to inject in that and also bring about sustainability in those developments, whether it is a renewable energy or the transportation, environmental consideration in those new developments. So my sustainability and development are intertwined. They cannot be separated.
Yeah.
So that is a voice I bring to the table. I hope to bring when I get elected. and especially the marginalized group, their voice is missing in those pieces, and they live with the impact of those decisions for the most part of it. When it comes to equity, I'm truly coming to it from the point of housing, education, and public health and employment. And affordable housing in our community is sorely missing. And it's because it's an affluent. The market has dictated the prices at which the homes can be built, or whether it is apartment buildings, they're all luxury buildings. So middle and low income people have no access. I like to say equity is important because when it comes to the recent event of George Floyd being murdered, we went into curfew. Most of our retail employees in our city commute from Minneapolis to our city. And we essentially had to shut down our retail stores because they had to get back home in Minneapolis. So when I look at that, I feel like we are all interconnected. And what happens in one area
affects another.
So
It does.
all
Yes, it does.
gather together collectively and see injustice anywhere is injustice to all of us. So if this happens in Minneapolis, we shouldn't say, "Oh, I'm in the suburb. It doesn't affect me." I worry. So I am championing affordable housing because it's the foundation of all the other things we can do. Whether it is a retail employee, I need to be able to afford to live in this community. And currently, at a $12 an hour wage,
employee,
you cannot survive in So
I'm hearing you speak, and it's like, Shalanda, it's like we're experiencing here also
in
Central Florida, in Orlando. You know, it's like marginalized community. It's the same thing everywhere. You know, and that's why it's great to have these conversations, because you don't have to sit back and say, "Am I crazy, or do I see these inequities?" You know, and how, you know, these employers are paying crappy salaries, and then people have to commute in public transportation that, quite frankly, sucks. You know, spend money on that. Then they're not home, you know, to spend quality time with their kids. You know, they're not able to, you know, then cook and prepare nutritious meals, because who has time for that? You know, and then comes the whole, you know, healthcare issues and all, and it's like you just said, it's all compounded. And just because you live, you know, in a fancy neighborhood, you know, it doesn't mean that this doesn't affect, you know, that you're not part of this, of bringing the solutions to this. And I think that bringing in the social justice and the equity portion of it is the most difficult, right? The most difficult into the equation. And that's where really, at the end of the day, the resistance comes in, because let's face it, it's all about dominating and controlling the resources. That's it.
Yeah.
Let's not even pretend, you know, that that's not what this is about. You know, because, you know, we've had a lot of conversations now ever since, you know, the murder of Mr. George Floyd, and the global outcry, you know, for equality and for social justice, about what does that, oh my God, what does that look like? It's like, oh my God, now we really have to do something. You know, it's not like diversity and inclusion efforts aren't like a second thought now for many. Like they're finally, oh my God, you're really seriously thinking about taking action. But it always becomes uncomfortable when you bring up the part of, because the equality and representation, that seems like, okay, we can start doing that. But when you start talking about funding, that's when it starts getting icky and sticky, right? Right, Shalanda? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are you experiencing the same thing over there in Minnesota?
Yes, we are experiencing the same thing. As a matter of fact, the reason I ran is really because some of the people who are considered as people who really are allies when it comes to truly speaking truth to the issues such as the economic portion of it and how it permeates into the education system and the housing system. They are still not there standing up and advocating fiercely for the funding to be provided for that. And so I ran because I want to bring that voice, and I'm not going to be shy about speaking about it. And just to say, I am on the housing task force, and I'm going to be careful not to deal with all the things that we talk about. But there is a consideration of where land is being debated to be acquired, because once you acquire the land, you are able to control what goes on there.
Right.
But when it comes to the marketing piece of that, they are talking as camouflaging it and selling it with a language of saying, oh, this is going to be affordable, but it's going to be affordable to the veteran. Now, a veteran, no disrespect, we do have brown and black veterans as well. But in this context, I'm hearing it, and they're only specifically talking about the Caucasian veteran. It's very offensive in itself. So the community or the surrounding neighbors need to be told, this particular property, we are building a single-family home on it, and it's going to be sold to veterans, not necessarily the brown and black family moving to you. I honestly felt very offended by that. I ran specifically to be able to advocate for anybody who can afford, whether they are brown, veterans, blue, black, they should be able to have equal access to live with that particular home.
Yeah,
So,
that's great.
And those are the kind of things that motivate me to run, and I'm determined to win.
Yeah.
And in addition,
and you will win.
Yeah,
you will win.
Yeah.
You will win, Janet.
And then you, Alberder, tell us also then about, I mean, because I know that you're in different communities, right? So does this mirror, like, and each community has its own nuances. So talk to us about your platform and, you know, those things that you're putting your finger on and looking to amplify.
Well, I will say this is that, so I'm running for Congress, and so what we do impacts everyone, the entire nation, right? And I will say this is that the system is working the way it was designed to work. So for those who say the system isn't working, it is. It's working the way it's been designed for years to work, right? So since, and so we can't say it's not working. It was never really meant to work for us. So it wasn't designed that way. And so when you talk about what I'm running for, it really is all those things that Janet just talked about, and all of these things that we are always talking about. I'm going to speak about it in a little broader sense. So I actually attended the funeral here in Minnesota, the first service that they had for Mr. Floyd, for George Floyd, right? And it was the Reverend Al Sharpton he just spoke the truth that I think we all know. And there is this in our nation, and and I'm a patriot if ever there was one, but there's truth telling that has to happen. There's been a knee on our neck for such a long time, right? And so when it comes to education, there's a knee on our neck. When it comes to entrepreneurship, there's a knee on our neck. When it comes to healthcare, there's a knee on our neck. And then you put a knee on our neck and then blame us for not getting up. So, right.
You're so right.
So this is not something that's new. And this is why when I talked about electing, when I worked behind the scenes and gave up my time, my talents, and my treasures, it was to elect people who would recognize and speak to those things. But then I realized they didn't speak to them because they didn't really understand them, and they didn't impact their lives. They didn't see themselves associated or connected to those issues, right? In the same way. And so because the system was working for them, they couldn't see that it wasn't working for everyone. And so this is one of the reasons that I'm running. When we think about the 1994, I hear a little puppy, the crime bill, right? And this was done under a Democratic administration. That that crime bill completely destroyed the African American community. That's why we have mass incarceration, what we call the new Jim Crow, the prison, the school to prison pipeline. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and at a national level, what are we doing to address that? Nothing. How can we have so many of our of people from the African American community and the Black and Brown communities locked up, incarcerated? We don't even make up that much of the population, yet we're incarcerated. So we're breaking up families. This nation has a history of separating families.
Mm-hmm.
We saw this happen at the border. That was not the first time we saw it happen with the Native American
Yeah.
community. So we have a history. This is just a new way of doing it. And now it's through incarceration that we are tearing families apart. And we
Mm-hmm.
wonder why the kids aren't thriving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, right, because we created a structure that they cannot thrive in because somebody's making money off the work in the backs of their fathers and their mothers. Because there's the for-profit prison industry is getting rich. We are going back in time when it comes to voting rights. I'm from Mississippi originally. And as I told you, my family has been very engaged, and the worst thing one could do is not vote. So my father would round people up and take them to the polls because it was voting day. And so now to see people try and suppress our vote,
Mm-hmm.
I cannot on my watch allow that to happen. That is unacceptable. My ancestors fought too hard so that I would have that right. So, so that's one of the things that's important to me is, and then from an education standpoint, everybody has a right to a quality education. It shouldn't be because we live in certain zip codes. I know the idea that we have to go to Bloomington in a certain school versus another because we want our children to get a good education. It's one of the reasons I live in this suburb that I live in. It's a great school system. I was just on the school board in that school. My children have thrived because of their zip code. It's not because they were smarter than anyone else. It wasn't because they were more talented. I'd like to think they are, and they do too. But that's not really it. It's simply because they live in the right zip code. And for our children not to have every opportunity just because of the zip code that they live in, that's not okay. And so these are some of the reasons that I'm running. Affordable housing, we can make that happen, but we don't. And so all of these things can be addressed, but if we don't have people who are willing to speak about it, because that's the thing, this moment in time it requires us to speak the truth. And I've been, reflecting on a lot of the words of Dr. King, and it's the fierce urgency of now. Not tomorrow, but today.
Yeah.
And so we've been saying for so many years, tomorrow. When you talk about timing, it's not your time. It's not that time for that bill. It's not that time to address that issue. We'll get there. But we are now confronted with the fierce urgency of now. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It has to happen today. And which is one of the reasons that I stepped into this race is because, if I want to be a part of the solution, I'm going to have to step up in a way that I had never planned on. And so, and the rest of us have to do the same thing. So that we have to go some places that we wouldn't go, speak with some folks that we wouldn't normally speak to, do some things that may make us uncomfortable. But we cannot move forward and stay in the same place. It's not possible. So we have to move from where we are if we want to get to where we want to go.
As you both were speaking, it made me think of the saying, who feels it knows it. Was that Bob Marley? Who feels it knows it. And I think that that's an interesting perspective that both of you as candidates bring to the table. You've lived these experiences, you've experienced the disparities that needs to have a voice at the table to really effectuate meaningful social change. So I'm so excited. I'm happy that you guys were courageous enough to step out of your comfort zone. As an introvert, I'll tell you, I give you mad kudos. Mad kudos. Yeah. Because
I'm introverted.
yeah. Well, you're also a powerhouse, Alberder, according to your T-shirt. So you inspire me. Oh yes.
But you know what I found too, that we have to work together to eliminate the silos between the Black and Brown communities, and really come together because so we do a lot of cultural competency training, and in Spanish for recent immigrants that come into our region. so they understand, because they come from their countries of origin and there's not all of this diversity, right? So they're like, wow,
Mhm.
what the hell is this, right? And so when we explain to them that there's so many, first, it's a shocker to a lot of them to say, by the way, you brown. They're like, what do you mean I'm brown? you know
I've encountered that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, memo to you. You may look white, or you could pass, right? But the moment you open your mouth, you're brown. And so, and in Puerto Rico, we have a saying that says, "And where's your grandma?" Right? Because there's we're a mixture, of different ethnic backgrounds and races. And so, anyway, make a long story short, it's important, because if we can educate people, even using, our bilingual skills, to for those people that are coming into a market or don't understand other cultures, to really explain, listen, there's so many more common denominators that we have than differences. And actually, all of those policies, we're fighting for the same thing. That
Mhm.
oppression that
Mhm.
you feel is the same across the board in Black and brown communities across this nation. And then I feel like it's a major aha moment for a lot of people, but we need to demonstrate solidarity, in those efforts, and be able to eliminate those silos so we can really be effective in moving forward.
I think
And I
that's
think,
so key. That's
yeah.
so important because I will say when I said it was the best of times and the worst of times in 2016 with my campaign, what was beautiful is we live in the suburbs, right? And people,
Hmm.
I knew there was diversity here because I am out in community, right? But there are a lot of
Hmm.
people, particularly the party here in the state, that didn't believe that. And
Hmm.
so when you look at my campaign cabinet, it was everyone. It was the Jewish folks. It was the Muslims. It was the
Hmm.
people from Iran, folks from Colombia. It was we represented just the rainbow,
Hmm.
and so we came together, and it was the most beautiful thing. And for me, we represent our campaign the best of our community. This is what it can look like.
Hmm.
So that's why I feel
Yeah.
like we were victorious. We did not lose, we won. We had folks from
Oh,
Nigeria and Liberia and everywhere. Just
yeah.
this was our campaign, and we
Yeah.
all worked together as one. And that's why we were able to do something in this district when I ran that had never been done before. We brought out almost 3,000 more voters, and
Wow.
so which was amazing. And that's because we worked collectively. And so we weren't at odds with each other. We were in relationship with each other in a way that really changed everything. So after that campaign, what was even just it just gives me chills now is that the people who worked on my campaign who thought that they couldn't be involved in politics, that they couldn't run for office.
Hmm.
There was a gentleman, he is Muslim
Hmm.
and Egyptian, and he
Hmm.
ran for school board. And he thought, because if you could run for state rep, I can run for school board. I had
Hmm.
women, and there was someone else who decided that they would work on uh, a bigger campaign, so it was a statewide office, and they thought they could do that because I was like, well, Alberta, if we could do this, then we can do that. And so
Hmm.
one of the persons that worked on my campaign, he's mom. He's now a state legislator,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
so so all of these things. So there was this. It was wonderful to see people, who understood that you can do this. You can be a part of this. But the other thing, it also demonstrates to those who think it's not possible. It is possible. It's
Yeah.
absolutely possible. So
Hmm.
when we step into these spaces, and this is what I tell the people in Black Women and Black Women Rising, doesn't we want to win? We absolutely want to win. But just by the fact that we're in that race, we
Hmm.
change something.
Yes.
Hmm.
We change.
You're
Exactly.
changing mindsets, you're
Absolutely.
changing perspectives, you're
Yeah.
changing hearts. Yeah,
Yeah.
throughout
I
that
wanted to
process.
ask both of you something, okay? Because, we encounter this a lot, and in the past, sometimes, you're caught. You're caught in a situation where, like, little comments or little nudges, or
Little
like we were,
microaggressions,
oh,
call it what it
microaggressions
is.
or whatever come up. Yeah, exactly. And so, if it's not, you feel like if it's not like, you know,
Egregious.
earth.
Not like,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
it's like earth was shaking, right? That you're like,
Mhm.
whatever, let's just let it slide because you don't want to get the rolling of the eyes, right?
Mhm.
Or there she goes, the Latina loca again, bitching about, what I'm saying, or nitpicking at what I'm saying. So since you've both been in politics, right, and have done this, for several years now, how do you navigate? Because we do it from a corporate standpoint, but it could be pretty tricky. I'm assuming, right? In a because you're a public figure, like you're
Mhm.
out there, and so then how do you navigate addressing um comments or issues, or in a way that doesn't come across as being antagonistic, but that you're able to nip it in the bud, and not let it slide, because no, it kind of like those days of letting it slide are
Educate.
over.
Yeah,
Are
educate
over,
and hold them accountable in a
yeah,
nice way, in a
yeah,
way that's
yeah.
not offensive but more cohesive.
Yeah, because I know I could be abrasive, and that's why
Mhm.
I don't think I'll ever run for office, because I'm like, no, and I'm gonna be dropping f bombs left and right. I don't want to do that. So how do you? Because I could tell you have strong personalities. You're
Mhm.
very determined, decisive, no
Articulate.
nonsense.
Mhm.
Yeah, women, and oh my God, I don't. Please educate me on how to do this, because
Educate us.
I can yes, exactly, us on how to do this, because it must not be easy.
I am going to go, it's not easy, but I'm going to start with when I ran in 2018 and I got 7,700 votes. It also encouraged me that we are moving and changing. So much as I say my community is predominantly white, but I do have 7,700 political capital to expand, and I'm hoping to build onto that. So not all of them are that or not wanting Janet. They actually put their money where
Mhm.
the mouth belongs. Um, so counting on that, I have reached out to a couple people here in the community, and one of those people really has been on the forefront. I can go back to even 2016 as to how we started working together on affordable housing issues.
Mhm.
And she is a fierce advocate of social justice and how historically uh, oppressive systems have been built, specifically with housing, going back to the 1930s, and had collaborating with the um, urban development to deny and redline certain communities. It was all sanctioned by our government, and she's very critical of that. So I reached out, and I believe I have an ally.
Right.
And the response I got is, it's not crushed me, it really has just made me more determined. And the question was, you do not have government experience. That was profound. And I said, I do work for the government, you know that. It's state government. I'm a state employee. Oh, yeah, you do, but I'm not sure. And then I asked for the other person who they are supporting, if yes, that person works for the government. And I was told, no, I'm not sure. So that in itself told me enough information of what I want. So as long as you're advocating on my behalf and I'm in the background, we are okay as you being my ally and my agent. But the moment I ask to step forward and be advocating for my community, you now don't think I am qualified.
Say that.
Yeah.
That person.
Great.
So much as I want to say it's prevalent, I don't believe it is prevalent, because the other side, I have had multiple people reach out asking me to run, and they are going to be very supportive. So I am so encouraged that yes, we will have one person who doesn't think you're qualified because you're Black, but there are others, multiple, far outweigh the one voice that really believe you should be running at this moment. And by that itself, I am so encouraged to be running at this time so we can change our community for the better. So those microaggressions are there. So, but I just take them off because it's cancelled out by the multiple other people who are supporting me and willing to step forward and contribute.
That's great. So that's what pushes you is that balance, right?
Yes.
And what about you, Alberta?
So I agree with Janet on the fact that there are so many people who are for you, and you have to forget about those who are against you. So because we can't give them that energy. So I would say it depends on the situation in terms of how I address some of those things. And because some situations you have to say, is it worth my energy today? No. Right? Because that can be very draining. If we are always fighting a battle constantly, because we know they come at us, every day. If we walk in this world outside our door, we're going to face that.
Yeah.
So you have to determine, will I fight that? Is that worth fighting? No, I'm going to walk on. I'm just going to keep moving on. And then there's sometimes when you say, I can't let that one go. So I think really saying, what is worth my energy and requires me to respond, and then what isn't. Right. And I will say, I will be honest, 2016 candidate Alberta is very different than 2020.
How so? Okay, come on. Tell us.
So here is the thing. With age comes a little more freedom, I think.
Yes. I just turned 50 and it's all out. I feel so liberated. Yes.
So guess what? I hit that same mark in May, and I'm just like, so this Alberta may not take as much stuff as that Alberta did, right? So I'm just saying, because you are at a different point. The nation has changed, but so has the person in the nation. So I'm like, don't start now, won't be now. I have a whole different. I have a whole different perspective, and I'm like, I'm not taking any prisoners because I don't have a jail for you. So, right. So it's a different boldness and a different attitude, and I think because I'm more comfortable in myself. So as we get older, we're comfortable, and the things that I once feared, I don't fear because I've gone through this. That's the beauty of when you've lived a little life, and you've experienced some things. You figure out what I was afraid of. It was nothing. Look, we're in a pandemic now. I'm like, really? We're weathering some storms that we've never weathered before. And so, and I'm not afraid of speaking my truth because my speaking the truth is what's going to bring about change.
Right.
Yeah. So 2020 candidate Alberta is not like 2016. 2016, she had to walk a little lighter. She had to, make people feel good and all of that. 2020 is like, this is what it is. And this is what I'm trying to make it be. You can either join me or not. And so I think, but also I'm because I've done a lot of coaching of candidates that I focus a lot on framing, right? So this is candidates, it's not, and what people don't understand, most of the candidates that I have coached and recruited and trained, most of them have been white. So, very few of them have been. Until recently, until I deliberately, intentionally start really putting my energy into Black women. And so I think we do need to frame things in a way that, they say things that make you go, For instance, people say to us, oh, all of these Black women have jumped into these races, right? But why didn't you go through the process? Which means, why didn't we go through the whole endorsement process and go to the DFL party and blah, blah, blah. The party that never gives us necessarily the respect that we deserve. And when we do go through the process, then they change the rules of the game. So why didn't you go through the process? And I said, oh, but we did. So you got to know how to frame it. I said, see, here in Minnesota, you have until June 2nd to file for office. We met that deadline or we wouldn't be on the ballot.
Yeah.
I'm like, so we went through the process. And then, so what do they say to that? Because I was like, that's the process outlined by the state that if you want to run for office, you have to file by this deadline. And I'm like, oh, we met that. We did that. So we went through. And so I think sometimes just, you got to step back and say, this is the question that you're asking me, but I'm going to turn it right back on you in a different way.
Right.
I think balancing, we can't, and I think for Black women, for anybody who really is a person of color, we have to conserve our energy and really fight the things that we need to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important because and have that balance. There has to be some joy. And
Yeah.
if we're constantly in a state of fight, we weren't built that way. That's stress to our
Mm-mm.
bodies, stress to our minds. We weren't built to always be in that fight mode. Unfortunately, this world can challenge us in that way, but sometimes we go, okay, you are just an idiot. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
just keep walking. Like that's not for me to deal with, right?
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
for, but and so we have to really, yeah, you just look at them and go, okay. So it's like that's what we're doing today. Yeah, I'm moving right on. But I think
And it
it's
happens,
really,
yeah, and it happens in our communities too. Like
yep.
there are a lot of people that reach a level of leadership or influence that perhaps have been longer, and then you look up to you're like, oh wow, so we do have representation, but for some reason, then they become gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then you're like, but wait a second,
Yeah.
it's like I'm not asking for any favors. I'm just saying it's like it's great that you're there to give everybody a voice, but then
Mm-hmm.
you're not, and then they
Hmm.
become complacent, comfortable, and
Hmm.
all of that. And so then, there's something to be said also about the candidate,
Yeah.
about evaluating your candidates, because that's a discussion that we've had, like over here in Central Florida. It's like it's all about like Puerto Rico because it's the largest, it's like in Miami, it's Cuba, and over here.
Hmm.
And I go to a lot of these meetings and I'm like, And they're like, what do you mean, And I'm like, just because you're Puerto Rican doesn't mean I'm going to 100% be behind you,
Mm-hmm.
because there might be a Colombian candidate or an Ecuadorian candidate or a black candidate or
Where the
even a
values align.
Caucasian candidate or a female
Hmm.
or whatever. I'm looking for the person, And
Mm-hmm.
so then sometimes that's a put off, that behind closed doors, happens even within your own
Yeah.
culture or
Hmm.
or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
diverse group, but they have to be had too, because sometimes people, it's more about value alignment
Yeah.
than it is about you know about backgrounds or shared culture or country of origin or whatever or gender or whatever it is you want to call it, and
Mm-hmm.
so I think that it's important to have these conversations so we can identify not only in our communities,
Communities.
but in other communities, people that we feel, wow, I see
Mm-hmm.
you, I
Mm-hmm.
hear you, I like that, count count
I
me in,
support you. Yeah.
yeah, count me in, because it's more about that. No, what are
Mm-hmm.
your thoughts
So
on that?
actually, I I actually had that experience and it was amazing because I don't want to give specific names because if I do, people go, what? So,
We're gonna
um,
be nice. We're
yes,
gonna be
yeah, so I'm not
Minnesota
going to
nice.
do, we're going to be, yeah, I've learned how to be Minnesota nice.
Yeah,
And,
I heard about
No,
that.
no, no,
We'll
no,
talk
not
about
too
we,
that
much.
too.
Not too
Yeah,
much.
we,
That's a
no,
whole
we
nother
call,
conversation we can have. Yeah.
it sure is. We call it Minnesota passive aggressive, but
yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead. So
But
what happened?
it was for a federal office, and there were two candidates, and one was considered a black candidate, the other was Latinx and and Latina. And so I actually worked on the campaign of the Latina candidate, and people were just like, "How could you? You are a part of Black Women Rising. How could you not?" And I stepped down from my role at Black Women Rising as the conductor for the Underground Railroad. I'm like, I'm going to take a step down for a second, get off. I'm getting off the train, and I'm
Uh-huh.
going to work on this campaign. So, and that's what I did. And I was like, because I believe this is the best person. And I adore the other
Mm-hmm.
person as well. It wasn't that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't think the other person was a good candidate. I absolutely did. I was like, but I think this is the best candidate. And because of that, this is who I'm supporting. But I would never say anything derogatory or
Yeah.
about either candidate. Um, but I made a choice, and people didn't understand. It was like, how could you be this and this? I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
because this is who I believe is the best candidate, and
Mm-hmm.
this is who I think will push the agenda forward in the way that it needs to. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
I don't adore this person. So it is. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's happened to me also here. That they're like,
Yeah.
you're supporting the gringo when there's a Puerto
Uh-huh.
Rican. I said, because I don't know the Puerto Rican candidate. I've never
Mm-hmm.
met the person and don't have a relationship, but I do with this other person who happens to be Caucasian, and we're like sisters, and she's freaking amazing. And I know that she has a mouth on her. Like she's
Mhm.
unafraid, unapologetic. She's going to get things done. The Puerto Rican candidate wound up winning, and I'm glad now we've become friends too, right? Because in that process, I'm like, well, why? So you're complaining to me that I'm not supporting this person, but you've never introduced me to this person, you know? And if you're so tight, well, that you know what I'm saying. So then now you're telling me, you know.
Mhm.
So anyway, it's an interesting dynamic.
I want to say this around that because this is the issue of race that I find even more challenging than that space we find ourselves in is the idea that people have said, and I've seen it written, even with this race, don't support these candidates just because they are of the color of their skin. And I was like, you should go ahead and say black because that's what you really need.
Yeah.
You know, we should vote for people for because of their platforms and their ideas, not just because the color of their skin. So they're cautioning people not
Right.
to vote for us or get caught up in whatever it is they think people are going to be caught up in and
Right.
perhaps elect the brown candidates or the black candidates, right?
Right.
So it's like, well, let's see if they're qualified. And this is what I say. I'm like, I do not remember you saying that when I've looked at a slate of candidates that's been white for years. Not
Mm-hmm.
once have you said, don't just support them because they're white.
Right.
You didn't feel compelled to say that. And so immediately they think that the only thing we have to offer if someone would support us, it has to do because, we want some
Yeah.
diversity.
Yeah.
Here's the bottom line is that when we step into these races, we are more than qualified. Because we always have to be. If we're in corporate America, we are
Oh,
always
yeah.
more
Have to be
qualified than
overcome.
other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. We know this. We've been taught this that we have to be better. We have to be the best. We can't be here. We have to be here. We have to be twice as good, three times as good. So when we step into these spaces, we are beyond qualified.
Right. But it
Beyond, and I
pisses me
say,
off. It also pisses me off though from a voter perspective because then they think that we're not thinking and not we're not actually going through a process of evaluating the candidates too. That again, that we're just, we're just gonna, but I'm not gonna lie though. I have a confession to make.
tell the
When
truth.
I was
I know it.
when I was much younger, and of course I didn't know the who's who, I would go by surname,
Of course.
Does that sound, because, as you grow with maturity, then you want to really know, right? But when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would go down and say, okay, from this party, who sounds right? Like, yeah.
But
And it sounds terrible, but
no, it
even at
doesn't.
a young
No.
I know because I know, but the thing is, I think that's one of the big things that mainstream America is afraid of, and it's that all of these oppressive tactics or dynamics that have been inflicted upon our communities will then turn, right, and
Of
will be
course.
inflicted
On
upon
them
them
because of the
when
demographic shift.
our communities become minority majority, which is like that's it. It's like we're literally living that, right? And so here in the U.S. And so what I'm always telling to our circles or to anybody that would listen, is that we need to ensure that good, qualified, good-hearted people, like just decent people, get into those positions of influence and of decision making, so that way when the tide turns, we stop the cycle of oppression. That when we are the majority, we're not, these fears will dissipate because no, we're not going to do the same in turn, and so that's hard to do, but I think we can accomplish that.
I think we can. But I just wanted to say this because we shouldn't put certain pressures on ourselves, like because you want that one candidate that we're wanting to be perfect and be this and all of that, and you've had 100 or 1,000 that weren't,
That suck.
and you didn't. It sucked. And
Yeah.
so if I pick the brown candidate because you've picked the white candidates all the time, and my brown candidate doesn't turn out to be great, well, you know what? We just run closer to where you've been for the, like,
Right.
so what's the, right? So you can't set a different standard for us. I refuse to allow you to set a different standard. I'm like, and that, if you don't think all of the people you had before, they don't represent you, you keep voting for the same thing, right? You keep voting for the same person. It's for a long time.
Yeah,
it's worked for them. And then you tell me, well, we tried that one. That's what they did in corporate America, right? We tried diversity. We brought in that one candidate. That one candidate wasn't successful. So we don't know if we want to bring in any more candidates from.
Right.
What about the hundreds of other people that you brought in who weren't successful? Did you stop hiring white people as a result? I don't think so.
Yes. Yes, it's all about the framing, Alberta. I'm learning that today. It's about the framing. Yes. Well, listen, this has been great. Any last, words of encouragement to other women that are looking, in other, candidates of color too, that are looking to take the plunge, and do that quantum leap from, anonymity to being, out in the process of running for elected office?
I'm going to chime in on that one. Like I say, I met Alberta back in 2016, and she was running. And it just speaks to the importance of structure, because this political system or campaign system or the two parties were never designed for us to merge in and just take off and be successful. So having Alberta, like to call my sister my political consultant, because she really is. She guided me. It's like, did you talk to this person? Why not? Someone who just pushed me was Alberta, and it has remained with me since 2018 when we consulted Alberta. Thank you. It's like having the systems to support the brown and black candidate is so important. From the campaign from the conversation, from the godmother who takes you under the wing and takes you. We do not have those. Yeah, we will soon in my sister Alberta. So having that in place is so profound. So you wonder why we don't have a pipeline of brown and black candidates lining up to run for higher offices. It's because we've been excluded all along. But before we populate and if whatever the outcome is, I am looking to mentor and lend my expertise to the next candidate, brown and black, who's running. And that's what my sister Alberta has done for me. And
thank you.
It is so powerful to have.
That's awesome.
To pull each other up. So that is my last piece of talking the infrastructure in the political field.
So I'm gonna thank you, Janet, because now you have me all weepy over here. You're destroying my image, my tough girl image.
There's strength and vulnerability.
Absolutely, and I learned that through running. To be honest with you, I will say this: I so appreciate what Janet just said, because for me, I know it is hard for us, but I do know we have very qualified, passionate people. And when I met Jen, when she reached out to me, and I had an opportunity to sit down with her, we met at a Target. I don't know if she remembers that little table at the little coffee place, but just to see her passion and for affordable housing was something that was really important to her at the time, and there were other issues as well. And then to think, okay, that's a woman that I want in office. Right? That's a woman who I want to see in that space. And I don't want her not to do this because she doesn't have a support system. And so, and the hard thing for me is that I can't reach everybody, right? So to know that Janet now, I don't have to, because Janet knows how to do this. So Janet she will be mentoring and reaching other people. She'll pay it forward. And so, and then, so because you want people like Janet to run for office, because she's authentic and she's genuine. There's so many women like her who can make a difference, and they just need someone who will take their hand for a moment and say, you can do this. I'm going to ask you the hard questions. I'm going to, take you to task. but I do it with love, right? I do it out of love because, and you can see all that they can bring to a community, and you want those people in those spaces because that's where the change is going to happen. So it's just been, and so for me, I don't really get paid for this part of my work. This is what I do because it fills me in a way that nothing else can. But to see Janet do so well, and then Janet now, and even afterwards, I was like, you still have a platform. Because what I tell her is that if you run a good race, you will still have a platform. People are going to reach out to you and they're going to want to have conversations with you about the issues that's important. And Janet experienced that after she, after she just about won a race, but missed it by a couple of votes. Because I won't say she lost. I'm like, so then people want to have conversations. So she still has been able to have impact and sit in spaces that have changed the lives of other people that she wouldn't have. So I say, here's the thing: is that it is challenging, it is hard, but we still have to do it. We're not where we all want to be yet. We are making progress, but we can't stop now. So, and if you are a woman who's done this before, please make sure you take the hand of some other woman and help her do this as well.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful because we're almost returning back to where we started this conversation of creating that weaving, that basket weaving of connections, of authenticity, of shared values, of shared vision, coming together and working together and combining our collective resources to really help us elevate each other and our communities, all communities, right? Not just communities of color, but all communities. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So listen, I'm still the introvert. I still don't plan on running for political office, but I have to tell you, I love the openness, the honesty, the authenticity of this conversation. Both of you have inspired me to look at how I can become a change agent within my own space in new and creative ways. I may not go political, but I can definitely effectuate change in other ways. But you both are such an inspiration. And
thank you.
Alberder, you're now my sister friend girl.
Yes. We're all like one now. Thank you.
Yes, and talking about an inspiration, it's what children will see too. I mean, that I think is also one of the most valuable outcomes, right?
Yes.
Of seeing strong, courageous women, who are moms and aunts, and if you don't have kids, your titis, like aunties, your godmothers, your daughters, your out there, because then those that come behind us will say, oh shit, I mean, so this is, how do you say, it's normal. It won't be something.
It is.
Yes, like you said with your dad, to you it's like, wait a second, my sister, my father,
my mother.
This is not.
You're extending beyond the family unit.
So
into the community unit.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you. Like, we want to thank you both for joining us. We want to keep track of your races, and then we want to celebrate. We're going to celebrate.
We're providing support from Orlando.
Yeah, support from Orlando.
Thank you.
Anything you need, like seriously, anything you need. Yeah, we'll have a conversation offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna have a conversation so we can support you guys. And when you win, we're gonna have the little fiesta podcast to celebrate. Okay.
Absolutely.
That sounds wonderful.
That sounds great. I'm so excited. Listen, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll be talking soon. In just a few months.
We're
gonna be talking soon.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
This concludes this episode of I Have Something to Say. We want to thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify and iTunes as well. There's more to come next week. And remember, if you have something to say, it's time to speak up.